Have you ever wondered what would happen if the cycle of life were more than just a simple concept? If souls could find a way to communicate with us even after death? Imagine standing before a garden that not only decorates but also harbors a dark secret. A secret that could change your perception of life and death forever. I invite you to dive into this story that explores the thin line between beauty and the macabre, where flowers are more than mere plants and memories transform into desperate screams. My name is Samuel, and for years I have worked as a gardener in the old cemetery of the city. It is a quiet place, or at least that is what the old tombstones covered in moss and the distant singing of the birds attempt to make you believe. But if there is one thing I have learned from this profession, it is that death has its own language, a language that only a few manage to understand. At first, my days were spent pruning shrubs and caring for the plants that adorn the graves. However, over time, I began to notice something strange. The flowers I planted on some graves seemed to come alive in a disquieting way. Their colors were more vibrant, and their petals danced in the wind in a manner almost human. With each new dawn, I also noticed that these little flowers had an uncanny resemblance to the deceased beneath them. It was as if each plant carried a piece of the soul of the person buried there, a unique connection that both fascinated and terrified me at the same time. I couldn't help but question whether I was truly seeing what I thought I was seeing. I became obsessed with this idea, and as time went on, I decided to turn it into an art form. I began to create the most extraordinary garden, a place where each flower would serve as a reminder of those who had passed. Soon, the cemetery transformed into a beautiful garden of person flowers, where each plant displayed a distinctive feature of its deceased counterpart. Some had bright eyes, while others wore eternal smiles that followed me as I walked along the paths. It was a dazzling yet terrifying spectacle, but this is where the story takes a dark turn. With every flower that grew, I began to feel their weight, as if the souls of the departed were beginning to communicate with me. At first, they were soft whispers, like a distant echo asking to be remembered. But soon they morphed into heart-wrenching screams demanding their loved ones back. The families that once visited the graves started to neglect them as if an invisible chasm had opened between them and the memories of those they had loved. One afternoon, while watering the flowers, I heard a voice calling me. It was one I knew all too well, the voice of my deceased grandmother. She always had a special way of speaking to me, as if each word from her mouth was infused with love. However, this time her tone was different. It was filled with desperation and sadness. She wanted me to help her, to make contact with her family. It was then that an uncontrollable anxiety began to grow within me. These souls were not only seeking companionship, they were reclaiming something that belonged to them. I found myself caught in an internal struggle. On one hand, I enjoyed creating these beautiful and colorful flowers, but on the other hand, I knew I was playing with forces I did not fully understand. Despite my grandmother's warnings, I pressed on, planting more and more each day. The flowers became increasingly demanding, and my garden transformed into a chaos of whispers, moans, and wails. The souls began to manifest in ways that filled me with dread. I saw beings I had once loved, but also those whose stories I never knew. In a tragic twist, the person flowers began to wither if they did not receive the attention they craved. They dried up to become shadows of what they once were, screaming for their families to return and not to forget their legacy. I didn't know what to do. The guilt consumed me. I was a gardener who had sown more than just flowers. I had cultivated a clamor of lost souls, an effort to fill the void of death with the beauty of life. As days passed, the pressure became overwhelming. The flowers were more than mere memories. They were a tug-of-war between life and death, a constant reminder that I, Samuel, had the power to decide who deserved to be in my garden. I could no longer bear it. One night, amidst the screams and laments, I decided that I had to put an end to it. I turned off the lights and closed my eyes, seeking a moment of peace amid the storm. Then, I heard a heart-wrenching scream that pierced the darkness. It was my own voice intertwined with those of all who had passed through my garden. I realized that I had lost control. My very essence was fading as the souls cried out to be heard. Every petal that touched my skin was a scream of anguish, and my hands became fertile ground. The garden claimed me. The last thing I felt was an overwhelming wave of sadness as my own body transformed into a macabre garden where each flower screamed in the voice of someone I had known. It became an endless cycle of life and death, a death trap from which I could not escape. And as the wind gently blew through the flowers I once planted with love, I understood that the memories of the souls I had cultivated could never be forgotten, and that my garden would stand as a dark monument to the stories that, although forgotten, continued to bloom even in the realm of the dead. If you want to hear more tales that keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to follow my channel, give a like, and comment on what you thought of this story. Until next time, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful garden hides the darkest secrets.